Let's see here. I think we're live. Are we live? It seems to be live, but I haven't seen visual confirmation yet. And it looks like we're good. So hello, everyone. Hope everyone's having a nice Wednesday evening. We're back to our normal time, which I think will be normal again next week, although we might not have our esteemed colleague. But we're going to have a great show today, and hopefully we have some people with some good questions and feedback. We've got a couple good topics, I think, for today. But first, we need help from Mr. Eisenmenger.
Friends and neighbors. It's great to see, or at least be in the live presence of everyone on this absolutely outstanding, was it Wednesday? Yeah, it's Wednesday for those of you who are here in real time with us. But yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Today, the only exciting news that I have for you all is that I forgot my fancy Low Brass U brand water bottle. I left it in my car yesterday, so we are in the middle of a water bottle stress test to see how it operates after being superheated in the Seattle sun. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, we're very excited to see the results. It's a little sad. I actually still don't have a Low Brass U water bottle.
I have two.
I know you have two, because you know what happens. I don't think anyone really knows this story, but the first one that was sent, the color was incorrect. So I got them to send another one, and I was like, hey, can you send it to this address? Because I initially sent it to Connor so that he would have one, and then I was just like, well, maybe I'll get the color match one that's free because, they screwed up. And then they said they would do that, and then it showed up on Connor's doorstep, so now he has two. But what I will say is we will be in person in a week and a half.
Right.
And maybe you could bring one of those water bottles, and then I could have a Low Brass U water bottle without paying the I don't know how many dollars it is for me to get one myself.
Yeah, maybe I could remember to bring one of those with me.
You may have a few things going on, so if you
I bet it'll fit. I've got space for water bottles.
Okay.
We can make that happen.
If nothing else, that can be your gift to me.
Right. Well, that would be part of it then.
Yeah, there you go. Right. I expect a basket with confetti the little scrunchy pieces of paper.
It would kind of fit the theme to give you a water bottle.
Especially if it's the blue one, right?
Right.
But you can make your own choice if you're going to give me the dark blue, almost, or is it black? Is it actually black? Is that what we decided? The first water bottle?
It's a very dark navy.
Okay.
It was not all the way black. It was definitely blue. Like, they got the blue value.
It was just not RGB code 00080.
It wasn't, and it's weird that you remember that.
One, it's a really easy one to remember.
True.
Two, it's necessary to remember those sorts of things. When you're doing websites and you're doing graphics and things, it seems silly to know the actual code for it. There are multiple ways that it can be done, but the easiest one to usually remember is the 6-digit one. But mine is all zeros and one other thing. 4080. It's pretty easy to remember.
All right.
It could be a lot harder to remember, I think, but let's see here. See if I got the comments thing working. Haven't tested it out yet. There we go. DJ Woomy, I believe this channel is run by both of you. Upside down, exclamation point, upside down, exclamation point, upside down, exclamation point. I would say it's mostly run by me. Connor's on our streams. You might see more of Connor in the future. No one can exactly tell you how this channel is going to go. I definitely am the type that has plenty of future plans. I don't think that anyone has ever accused me of not thinking about the future. That being said, yes, baby steps to get there. But we do have some plans. We have some talks about various things, maybe some small ensembles. That's kind of a thought. But all of that is a little collaboration, maybe a trombone quartet, maybe a tuba euphonium quartet, just some ideas. We'll see. That's up in the air. That definitely requires more people to be involved. And, you know, it's one thing when I'm giving up a lot of my time and O'Connor's giving up some of his time as well. It'd be another thing to ask you to fly across the country and also 2 other people to be here, and, you know, it would be a little bit involved to do those sorts of things. Although I hope that they're on the horizon, but I won't make any guarantees just yet.
It's not impossible. I bet we can say with certainty 2 things. One is that I will be somewhere in your region of the United States within the academic year. We know it confirmed at least once in a nice mug. Yeah, it looks great.
I've only consumed water out of this mug,
There you go.
because I don't want anything
And
to
then-
stain it.
The other thing is, lots of good trombone players in Texas. Lots of good tuba euphonium players as well. So if we wanted to make some sort of music happen in the Texas area, I bet it would be pretty easy to find some people that were
Right. It's,
playing it.
you know, it's definitely not, you know, it's not impossible. And I think that it'll happen at some point. It's just, you know, also think about it from like just a logistical perspective of filming things. You know, kind of the general rule of filming, you know, music is that you want to have 1 more camera than you do performers, you know, within reason. You don't need 90 for an 89-person orchestra. But, you know, for a quartet, I would probably like to have at least 4, you know, maybe even 5. And right now I could do 3 relatively easily. You know, there, and also microphones and things. It's like, am I going to do, you know, just room mics, which I definitely have the capability of doing right now? Do I want to do more than that? Also, my office that I do all my filming in, you can never know how big it is, but I will tell you it's not that big. I think getting 4 people in here, I don't think we get 4 people in front of the background. I'll put it that way.
That would be squishy.
It like probably physically could fit, or we could do a 2x2.
That's what I was thinking. Like 2 in the front, like 2 like against the background.
Like we could do like, you know, like the classic like family photo, like, you know, mom and dad sit down and the kids stand behind mom and dad.
Right.
We do that sort of thing.
That would be good. That would be good for probably for tuba euphonium. I don't know about trombone slides.
But if you know, if everyone's on different tiers, you just go right above the person's head.
Right. Someone's gonna get spit on someone else.
Yeah, that's part of this. You know, talk to saxophone players; they're used to it. You know, it's
Right.
it's part of the big
I
band
had
game.
A rehearsal yesterday with the big band for the very first time in like traditional setup in like over a year, because we had been like when like we first started to gather again, we were meeting in a park, and so we had all the space to like do like the U shape, you know, where the saxophones are facing the trombones and the trumpets are on the bottom of the U. Oh, and then like I guess the rhythm section, I guess we were a circle, weren't we?
Yeah.
Everyone facing in. So easy to rehearse a big band like that. Except for that when you rehearse like that and then you play in a traditional setup, everything sounds worse.
I really like the flying V setup. You know what I'm talking about, where you have rhythm section in the middle, and then you have saxophones, you know, going one wing, and then the other wing is trombones with trumpets behind them. Are you familiar to that setup?
I know I've seen it like on stages before. I've never rehearsed specifically in that way before.
Yeah, I've only done it a couple of times, but I kind of like it, and I like the idea of like having the bass voices, like the bass winds, close to the rhythm section for like some, you know, quintessential bass line ostinato where it's bari sax, bass trombone, bass, left hand piano, sort of, maybe even guitar, and it's like everybody's like locked in there. I don't know. I've always liked that sort of idea. But yeah, we got some comments here. See, I don't know how to read this one. It's like, is it sarcastic because of the capitalization thing? Because that's all
Yeah.
what I always take it to be. But I don't know if I'm
like
being
the
mocked.
SpongeBob.
Am I not gonna kill this channel? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not sure.
um,
The implication. I
yeah.
know that usually when you see the alternating capitalizations, it's a funny thing.
Right. I know that I know the SpongeBob thing where he's he's like leaning. You can't see my whole body, but like leaning forward. Like I know what it is, and I've used it myself. But the subject matter is what is throwing me off in that statement.
Sure. Well, I probably would have been able to make heads or tails of it if I had read it in the moment.
Yeah.
That's all right.
But Juan says there lives in the Houston area, and there's some very good players in this area. Yeah.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah, it's a big metroplex. So, yeah, let's see. Yeah, just hit the two players with the slide easy fix, and it confirmed that it was sarcasm. So I will not be killing this channel.
That's
so
good. That's good to know.
Right. But anyway, yeah, I kind of like that setup of a big band, but it's not necessarily as practical all the time. But yeah, I think that doing some tuba euphonium stuff and some trombone quartet stuff, like I think that could be a ton of fun, and that could be really easily expanded to 8 players for both of those at some point. But people have to want to do it, and I have to have a place that's set up for that. I'd have to probably take over the living room, which I'm not sure if I'm. At one point in time, I did have the living room as my office, but I do not anymore, and I don't think I'm getting that back. At least not at this current dwelling.
For too long.
Right.
Do you still have a computer in the living room?
I don't. I mean, my partner has her computer out there.
I'm asking you if I can play The Sims in your living room.
Oh yes, that is where The Sims are played, on her computer. That's why I built that computer, was because I wanted my computer back, and it was being used to play Sims a little too often from my vantage point. But let's see here.
I love The Sims. I haven't played it probably since the last time I was at your house. That's like the absolute most fun game on the planet.
Yeah, it's not my thing, but I get it.
I love it.
Juan asks how to fix a trombone slide dent at home. If you're asking, no, take it to a professional.
I wish I knew I would fix a lot of things, but that's a.
Yeah, that's really not. Yeah, we're not
getting. There's no FDA accredited advice that we can give you for home remedy of trombone dent. It's just that's outside of our scope. There's even sometimes you go to a repair shop and they're like, we need to send this to somebody that's like a slide specialist. That's probably not the case. You could probably hammer it out at a good shop.
I think we should not use the word hammer and give anyone any ideas. Just a thought. But
yeah, don't do that. Take it to a professional.
But yeah, Craig says Texas just makes great trombonists. When I talked to Jim Nova when he went to UNT, he said that their recent bass trombone audition was 3/5 from Texas. Yeah, not super surprising. And Texas is competitive and good, though I'm happy I'm here because I feel like I'm a really good player because of it. There's an old saying that iron sharpens iron, and I think that that's very true. That's one of the reasons when I was 17 and 18, I decided I wanted to go to the University of North Texas because I knew there were a lot of players, there were a lot of good players, and I probably could have gone to other schools where I could have been the best player day one, and in some ways that could have been good. There are good things that come from those sorts of scenarios, but for me it was really helpful to be around a bunch of players who were better than me, maybe at everything, or maybe just at one thing, especially, being a multi-instrumentalist. I showed up and I could do some things pretty well, but other things I couldn't do really well. Some of my high range stuff didn't work out as well. Some of my, I didn't really play bass trombone at all at that time. I didn't have a very good classical trombone sound. Not that I'm claiming that I have an amazing sound now necessarily, but, low range on the tuba, that wasn't very good for me either when I started college. And I got around a bunch of great players, Connor being one of them, although he came a little later. But, that was, when Connor and I we'll say first met, for the sake of this conversation. But we met when I was a senior and Connor was a first year master's student, and we just played tunes together all the time, and it was just like, hey, what was that thing that you just played there? I don't know what that is. Can you tell me? And then vice versa.
Yeah, we did a lot of learning just like that,
right.
one-on-one. Which is funny that we did it in Texas because could have done it in Kentucky, but
Right.
that's all right.
Because we grew up with the same zip code,
Right.
but we didn't know each other very well. We'll say that we met once is the story. Let's see. Juan says, funny story, I went to take the trombone to the Music and Arts because I rent it to them and they give free repairs, and they said my trombone had 2 weeks in the shop to fix the slide, but then I got it back. Yeah, I mean, they're not necessarily incentivized to do it. It'd be nice if they did, but yeah, that's one of the troubles with renting a horn. You know, if it's not yours and you're not taking it to an independent repair shop.
Right. There's pros and cons to both, but the attention that they can allocate to any one trombone at Music and Arts is going to be proportionately smaller, just because it's such a big company. I mean, it's connected to Guitar Center, right? That's the Music and Arts?
I cannot confirm nor deny that, but the motorcyclist that just went by probably knows.
Yeah, it's just tricky. It's just it's a really, really big business. So sometimes like they have like, oh, we'll do free repairs in our shop to an extent. Like I don't know if they have like a repair person there, so it can be tricky. So maybe there's a smaller place that can work on it around town.
You don't have to dox yourself, Connor, and tell Eli what high school you went to. Although I do know that Eli is from Kentucky.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
and I
Cool.
I assume from Louisville.
Nice.
So you can tell, or you don't have to tell if you don't want to.
Yeah, it's okay. No,
Cool. So Connor didn't go to high school. He just
didn't go to high school.
he just magically appeared at the age of 18 as a grown young man, and just started college.
Got a GED.
No, you just had the GED. No one knows how you
Just
got
had it, yeah.
Science
Just
can't
realized
explain how you got it.
with it.
But yeah, so maybe a little segue from talking about the tuba euphonium quartet and the trombone quartet. One of the things that we were kind of interested in hearing from the audience, hearing from you guys, and seeing what you might want to see from this channel. I've definitely got some ideas of future videos and things. That's right, Eli. I knew that, Eli. I also didn't want to dox you on that. So
Very cool. Very cool.
yes. But we got Mystery Jeffrey. We got Mystery Jeffrey on here before we talk about all the.
Mystery Jeffrey is back.
Connor didn't go to high school. He taught high school.
And the correct tense would be teaches.
Right.
But yes.
But yeah, so some videos that I've kind of been thinking. One of the ones I posted a YouTube short. If anybody's hip to what YouTube shorts are. Seems to be like the let's take market share away from TikTok and from Instagram Reels. Like let's get into the portrait mode content, short form content game. But yeah, so I posted a couple of those, and one of the ones that I posted was just like a quick rundown of my instruments that I have, and then I thought I might do a more in-depth kind of tour of the instrument. So I think that's probably the next, talking head video is going to be that. And especially while I still have Mystery Jeffrey's sousaphone, which I actually just played on a gig.
Nice.
Which was a ton of fun, and definitely a better choice than either of my tubas for.
Oh, we talked about that a couple of sessions ago. How did it go?
It went pretty well. I mean, I'm not going to claim that I'm perfect or anything like that, but I thought it was a lot of fun, and I think I played pretty well, given it's not something I do every day, of walking bass lines and improvising on a sousaphone and all that sort of stuff. Because they definitely had me improvise basically every tune, which is fine, just like a one chorus basically every tune. And
they have that rest head out for the other horn players.
Yeah, yes. And that's, at first they were like, yeah, you can wave us off. And I was like, yeah, you probably want that rest. And so I'm going to take whatever, we're going to get whatever comes out of my bell so you can have that rest.
Right. What type of tunes did you play?
Most of them I didn't know. It was just, we had a book and it was just like a bunch of trad tunes. Some of them.
Book.
Yeah, there was a book.
That's nice.
Almost all of them were in F. Almost all of them went to the 4 chord.
Yeah.
There were some that were a little bit more tricky. There was one that was like a tango, like a D minor tango, which was pretty fun. I can't remember what it was called. I don't know. I could look it up, but like not on stream. It would take me too long. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. I had a good time playing that gig, and it was a rare Saturday that I didn't have another gig, so it was nice to do that. I looked at my calendar going forward for the rest of the year, and it's like, with the exception of, going to your wedding like that weekend, even though we don't have a Saturday gig, but I wouldn't be there anyway. And then on the 28th, I'm off of August. And then the only other days that I'm off the rest of the year, Friday and Saturday meaning, are the Friday and Saturday after Thanksgiving, and the Friday and Saturday that I believe are Christmas and Christmas Eve. So I will be busy, and I'll survive, but definitely will be a little. It's definitely making up for some lost time over the last year and a half for sure.
Right. Busy. Good to be busy, but it's a lot.
But DJ Woomy says, "Hey, I realized I had a question lined up. What ways do you practice? You're always pumping out videos and sounding really good." So thank you, first of all. For a lot of these videos, to be fair, I do know some of these etudes going in. The books that I'm recording from and the etudes that I'm playing, it's like the Blazevich book for tuba. That's like a bread and butter sort of book for me. To me, that's like a desert island etude book. I really like those etudes. I've known a lot of them for a long time. But I don't know every single etude. I don't know every single etude book, and even if I know it, that doesn't mean I don't have to practice it. So, I'm a really big believer in slow practice. For all of these etudes, if you were a fly on the wall, while in my office while I'm practicing these sorts of things, you would probably be surprised at how much I'm practicing slowly, and then when I decide to play it quickly. It's almost like all slow practice till the very last second is kind of the way that I do it. And that's ultimately, I'm trying to turn around these videos quickly, like you said. I'm trying to get out basically a video a day. And so to do that, the fastest way to learn this stuff is to do slow practice, which is not something I knew probably until like right as I'm turning into a master's student. Like I always was just like, whatever, I can figure this out my way. And it was inefficient. I kind of regret all the practice hours that I had, not saying that I shouldn't have practiced that much, but I should have practiced more efficiently. Because the way that I kind of look at it is like your efficiency multiplied by the actual time. And if you're practicing very inefficiently, it doesn't matter how much you practice, or it matters less how much you practice. So for all of these etudes, I'm doing a lot of slow practice, and I pick and choose. Like for example, the euphonium TMEA etude, the E-flat minor one that's in 6/8. That one, as soon as I saw it, it's like, cool, this one's going to take me a while. And so I was practicing that from the day that they came out until the day that I released it, which was maybe like that Thursday. They released the stuff on a Monday, and so it took me that long. But yeah, for that sort of stuff, there definitely is a long-term plan. Like I'm working on an Illinois etude for euphonium, and it's a characteristic study from the Arbin book. And I'm done with most of the Illinois videos already. But yeah, I could put that out and do it poorly, or do what a lot of people do and have it just be so heavily edited and not actually be able to play it. That's not what I like to do, and that's not what I'm going to do. So that one, I'd like to have it out tomorrow, but I know that video is probably more likely going to come out it's going to come out when it's ready, but that probably is going to be more like Tuesday of next week or something like that, if I had to guess. Do you have anything? I know there's kind of a targeted question to me, but you could also maybe give your 2 cents if you want to.
I can just tell you a couple of things, not too different from what you do. I would say that my motto is, if I can set up systems in my life where I can practice sustainably, and that like I can develop a routine that I can not only do consistently day after day, but like also like might even look forward to doing, then I'll have a way better shot at accruing more success. So I'm like a big fan of like rituals and like certain times of day that are sacred, certain exercises that I like write out in my planner and like know are coming up putting goals, like Zach said, like realistically attainable distances away from the present. So like I'm usually in the middle of like a year-long like tempo-related goal or an articulation-related goal. Right now, that's a long tones thing is what my big like long-form project is right now. But I like to set things like way far out in the future and then kind of reflect on how things get there. So yeah, reasonable little steps.
Yeah, and I think that kind of reminds me, going back to that E-flat minor etude. That etude taught me that I've let my double tonguing slip. And my long-term plan is to make it where at any point in time, because that was the only thing that really made that etude challenging for me, was my, I mean, the only thing was just like not being able to play it. But, you know, my double tonguing not being what I remembered it being because I haven't been practicing it, because I don't use it that much. But I used to be really, really good about practicing it all the time, and then when it came up, it would be really easy. But that was years ago that I was practicing it that much. And it just, you know, it goes how it goes sometimes.
It's one of those things I lose quickly.
Right.
Or like it was one of those things that as a professional, like outside of school, I lose very quickly. When I was in school and I was playing like marches in wind band and I was playing like trombone ensembles and like doing etudes for my lessons instructor, it was popping up at a regular enough thing where it was like, my double tonguing was never bad enough to be a problem, but it was never good enough to be exemplary.
Right.
And I always thought like, oh, I must globally just be a natural double or multiple articulation person. It must come easy to me. And then like I went into the professional world for a few years and played nothing but like horn section stuff and jazz tunes. And I was like, I haven't double tongued in a while. And then it would come up.
Yeah, and then it's
like,
a fanfare at like a, you know, a church service thing or something like that. And then you realize that like, oh, it's not even. Why is it bad? Like, I can tell that rhythm's wrong. I didn't mean for it to be wrong. Why is it wrong?
That's the real reason why spring can hang you up the most.
There you go.
Because you're going to do multiple tonguing on your Easter gig.
Right. Yes, there's no reason to multiple tongue in that big band feature. Not that it's only exclusively a big band feature, but anyway. Let's go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Zach and Hunter, how much money do you all think you have spent on music equipment and instruments? I think that's a very dangerous question. I almost don't want to answer that. More than I'd care to admit is probably a good, like, non-answer answer. We both have a lot of horns.
I would say that we've both like been careful to make purchases with the general interest of a return on investment. I think that's
Right.
something that like you and I talk about a lot, is like when we're like workshopping whether a horn is the right fit for us or a specific new type of horn or a new instrument would serve us, we usually have some sort of discussion or many discussions and phone calls about like, if you buy this instrument in your professional working life, like how long is it going to take for you to get work on that instrument that will pay back the cost and value of that instrument? And most of the time, particularly with small bore trombones, like
Can be pretty quick.
return on investment is quite quick, and that's why we don't buy small bore trombones that often. It's not like we're getting a new one every year, and we usually get used ones.
Not anymore.
That,
Yeah,
exactly.
The only between the two of us, correct me if I'm wrong, the only new horn for small bore that either of us has ever bought is the Edwards that I bought and then you bought used from me.
Correct. So it's now technically a used horn.
Right.
Because it changed hands.
And you didn't pay full. You didn't have to pay the $3,000 or $3,500, whatever it was. But that's the big thing. Both of us primarily buy used horns. We do have some new horns. We have bought new horns. I guess you don't anymore, technically.
Do what?
You don't have any horns that you bought new anymore, but you have bought a horn new.
Yes.
And I have as well. Not in a long time. I guess the last one was my euphonium, but that was a cheaper new, or wasn't the most expensive thing. But we've spent a lot of money. It's especially to give a real calculation, you have to deal with inflation or something. I would say that for both of us, it's definitely a 5-digit number.
Yeah, probably.
And can get into the 5 digits, a good bit. But that you also have to think about it. It's just like I always equate it to the idea of buying a Ford F-350 dual wheel truck. It's like, is that a truck you just buy? For most people, the answer is no. Like, you don't buy that to go, to just like do, normal drive around town stuff. If you have an F-350, there's a good chance that you're towing something, or you own a business that you need to use that, especially that from that business perspective. When that vehicle makes you money, like an F-350, you could pay $100,000 for like those huge trucks, depending on what options you get. At least like $80,000, but those trucks can get expensive. But the point is, if that truck is bringing in you money, and that's the only way, like I can't play a euphonium gig without having a euphonium. I can't play a tuba gig without having a tuba. Or it's very difficult. Borrowing instruments is not a good strategy. You want to do well, it's really hard to borrow instruments.
Yes, I speak from experience.
Yeah, it's not the best. I mean, I've had to do it. I mean, I guess I did it last weekend. That the sousaphone that I played was Mystery Jeffries. Although I will say that I'm basically, I'm giving him free storage rent. So
that's a trade-off.
Right.
There's lots of different delicate options in there. Like it's a personal decision for everybody, but like the more novel the instrument is, the more like it gets away from like the mainstream of your line of work. There's going to be a cutoff point where it's like it's not necessary for me to purchase an Offen Clyde.
Right.
But there might come a time where I am requested to or elect to create some sort of Offen Clyde music. Most of the time, if it's a gig that you're being asked to do, and I know this is
just to be clear, you know that there's no N in that word, right?
There isn't?
No.
Offen Clyde? I always heard an N sound. Offen Clyde. Awful.
No. Yeah, the awful Clyde.
There you go. But I don't remember why I was thinking about this, but it's a good thing to think about. I think about it a lot. It's like, and I know I've done this before where I've probably made the incorrect decision, but let's say you're living in a large metropolitan area and a big band calls for a bass trombonist to play a gig. You don't have a bass trombone, like myself. Should you, A, ask your buddy, hey, can I borrow your bass trombone for this gig? Or B, send them, the contractor or the band leader, your friend's phone number, the person who owns the bass trombone, because that person has made the concerted effort to purchase the bass trombone and is trying to make a return on that investment.
Right.
They probably wouldn't care either way if they loaned you the instrument to play the gig. They'd probably be happy to do it. I can speak from experience, as I've asked Zach to do this before, but looking back, hindsight's always 50-50.
Right, but there's at least for me, for the, I've got thingamabobs aplenty. I've got who's into what's its glory. I don't have every horn, but I've got more horns than most of the people that I know that are roughly my age. There are definitely people who have more horns than me, and more, and horns that I don't have. I don't have a bass trumpet. I don't have a contrabass trombone. I don't have a chimbasso. I don't have, what else? Those are the main ones. I don't have a valve trombone. Well, I technically do, but that one does not count. But anyway, that Connor is on the list of people who can ask me, hey, can I borrow a horn for something? And I wouldn't think about it. I would just say yes. That list is shorter than it's definitely not a 10-person list. I'll say that much. And occasionally, especially with like alto trombone, having an alto trombone in my possession, that's one that I often get people saying, hey, I'm doing this gig and I need alto trombone. And a lot of times I'll say no. And a lot of people don't like that answer. Would I loan it to Connor? Yes. Would I loan it to anybody? No. Because that alto trombone is basically the one instrument I own that hasn't made its money back. Talking about return on investment, I've not played enough gigs to pay for the value of the instrument at this point in time. Maybe one day I'll get there. But, the idea that I'm loaning it out for someone else to make money definitely doesn't sit super well, because it wasn't, the instruments cost money. But yeah, this is a long-winded answer. We should probably move on a little bit.
It's a fun conversation that I think it's good to have sometimes. Is like the gigging / brass player manners. There's like the talk that they famously give at UNT to entering students at the beginning of the year about nice things to do. don't play Rite of the Valkyrie on stage every warm up of every orchestra concert, like little things like that.
Yeah.
I wish that I had heard earlier in my life. You know, cool to talk about that stuff. But anyways.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean they're an investment, and I try to buy things that are going to pay for themselves. That's my goal.
Mm-hmm.
But let's keep going on here. This is going back to the question of how do I practice, and the way I practice right now is up to speed, stumbling constantly. I'll try the slow practice for this year's region auditions. And you're not alone. I used to do that, and we're all still guilty of it. You know, I wouldn't. Definitely, the point of this channel is not like, look at me, I do everything exactly the way it should always be done. I still fall into what I consider to be a trap of playing things faster than I can today. And I think that that's a really dangerous thing, because you practice problems in your own playing or in a piece of music, and you can really make things harder for your brain to learn. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the slow practice thing, I'm a really firm believer in it, and what I would probably say is I've never seen it not work. I've had students who aren't successful, but I don't think they did enough slow practice. You know, it's one of those things where it's just like, if you really do it, and you know, it's up to you to do it. No one can make you. People tried to make me for years, you know, and I probably didn't start doing it until like 21, 22. And I remember the first time that I really did it was, I mean, I can tell you when it clicked for me was when I was preparing for the Falcone competition the first time on tuba, which, if you don't, is an international tuba competition, anti-phoning competition, but I was doing tuba. And there's a really difficult piece, especially for me at the time, an unaccompanied piece, and I had all these 30-second notes. And I remember I started slower than half tempo. I think I started 40% of the tempo. And I did that for a month. Like a whole month, and that was when I was like trying to run every day too. So I like put it in Sibelius, because it's this really weird atonal sort of thing, almost a 12-tone row, and I had Sibelius playing it at half tempo, that I would just listen to that sound, and then I'd play at half tempo or like 40% tempo, and yeah, just it definitely made a difference. And when I played that piece in the competition, specifically like the sections that were really hard with the 30-second notes, I don't think it could have been cleaner. I really don't, because I did that work. You know, I put in an obscene amount of time into that specific thing. Do I always do a perfect job with that? Probably not. But, you know, I definitely, you know, it definitely worked in that scenario. Let's see. So Mystery Jeffrey says, and Keith says he remembers that Falcone piece. Yeah, the Canzonet by Claude Baker. Do you find creating videos helps your practice habits or overall playing? I really do think it does. I think at the end of the day, for me, and Connor, you know, you don't see Connor's videos, but Connor also does make videos, so he can definitely answer this question as well. But since I hijacked it, I'll start. But yeah, I say this not in a self-deprecating way, but in like a positive way. I know exactly what I'm bad at, and I know exactly how bad I am at certain things, because that microphone does not lie. It tells you exactly how you sounded, and I know a lot more weaknesses that I didn't know, and you have the ability to slow down things and check for, check for things to be better rhythm. You can play a pitch back and play it at the piano and realize, oh, that was really out of tune. Like a note that I learned that I probably haven't been playing in tune on my bass trombone is single trigger low D. It's like, it was sharp like every single time when I did a recording of one piece one time, and I was like, I have to re-record this because one note I can't seem to play in tune, and I just needed to put my slide out a little bit further. And I mean, I probably wasn't doing that always, but you know, my bass trombone is a horn that sometimes maybe doesn't get used all the time. But Connor, you want to answer? You give your 2 cents on that?
Sure, I can give that 2 cents. My bad note that I play it by feel and not by ear is 6th position low F. For some reason, like that one's always bad. there's that one excerpt. I listened back to myself at an audition one time. I went, bum ba-dum ba-dum ba-dum, bomb. It was just like 2 and 3 hardcore incorrect. So I don't know why. I just hear it a half step sharp. I don't know why. But recording myself, I've always been pretty good about recording myself. Like even like it like before I was like posting things on social media, which is probably more frequently like how I record myself now, just because it's like practice journal woohoo sort of thing. But even like old videos of me that I found on like prehistoric like email accounts and Google Drives, like I was always doing a lot of that, like little bits in my practicing. Before I started recording myself, I cannot tell you with any certainty what I was getting better at or how fast I was improving. And at right around 2014, I can start telling you with exact certainty what things I wasn't playing well. I can tell you when I overcame those playing challenges because I have actual evidence of it happening. And that has been significant for me. And as far as like making videos, like final products that sometimes I either present for stuff on the internet or things to announce like playing at places or things like that, it comes in waves. Usually when I get back into like posting, it's for the purposes of keeping a diary of my playing the same way that I would if I was throwing it on a Google Drive in 2014 that nobody was ever going to see. And then sometimes, like, if I do that long enough, it'll skew into this, like, I'm recording to impress as opposed to recording to express or recording to vlog, just tracking my progress. And I have to get away from it, but that's just me personally. Sometimes, like, most of the time, I'm, like, working on playing issue. It's, like, this amoral, completely black and white, like, articulation exercise or this tune or these changes. And I'm like, my goal is to track that. And then sometimes I like in the middle of that process, something switches. I don't know when, but it's like, oh yeah, got to get a killing video to get points on the internet. That is so important to me. And then I have to take a step back and be like, what am I doing? And then just like don't post for like 6 months. So we're in the middle of one of those right now.
Yeah.
In case you were wondering.
But, you know, you also have other things going on.
That's true.
But, yeah, you know, posting videos, if nothing else, it keeps me practicing. You know, posting a video a day on YouTube, yes, sometimes I do multiple in a day, and I don't have to do one that day, and I'm not always doing one on the live stream day, so I didn't do one today. Been practicing for this week, and it's good for me to have practice days for upcoming videos. But, you know, anyway, it's just, you know, to answer your question, Mystery Jeffrey, I think it has helped. It doesn't solve everything necessarily, though. Let's see here. DJ Wumi says, for sure, I think it has something to do with our egos. We want to prove to ourselves that we can do it first try. Yeah, and like ego in that way is not generally helpful. And so I definitely had that same thing for a long time, and I had decent success with those things. It's not like I was not doing well, but you never become the best you can be until you start doing slow practice. You might be the best player in your school. You won't be the best you can be, and there's probably a professional who does it better. So just a thought. Let's see. Craig says, as an individual, it is hard to make money back on investment for a real professional contrabass trombone and a bass trumpet. Those are more rare than an alto clarinet gig. Yes, especially because alto clarinet is reasonably common in a band, at least, and in orchestra to some extent as well. And that's why it's really hard for me to invest in a contrabass trombone or or cimbasso or a bass trumpet. Those are definitely things that I would like, but a real contrabass trombone, to my knowledge, I don't think you're getting one for under 10 grand. Maybe the Wrath is like 9 something, but for the most part, for a contrabass trombone, you're going to spend 10 grand for what I believe Craig is implying is a real contrabass trombone. I'm not trying to put down anything else, but the big manufacturers have been making them for a really long time. They're 10 grand, or sometimes a lot more. Like Tyne, theirs is more like 16 grand, depending on the configuration and things, and how long it's been sitting in a shop waiting for someone to buy it. But yeah, and bass trumpets also, you know, you're probably looking more at like 4 or 5, depending on what it is. Yeah, it adds up for sure.
Right. You can get a cheaper one, but yeah, you're probably going to, like, you can make a return on the investment of either, but you're going to have to book those gigs yourself. Like, it's, you know, most people aren't like, even if there is a gig or like an orchestra is going to play something that calls for contrabass trombone, maybe they know that like there's someone in the area that owns one, but more often than not, like really like big orchestras that are going to be programming things that have contrabass trombone music in them and they're actually intending to like do it, they have one already, and they'll let the bass trombone player or
I think with contrabass, usually it's the bass trombone player, but I wouldn't say that you should expect an orchestra to have a contrabass trombone. I would say that a cimbasso is somewhat common for an opera orchestra because it's used a lot. But for the most part, to my knowledge, I mean, I'm sure that there are orchestras that have contrabass trombones, but I would say
the contrabass trombone. I guess that's a better question.
I mean, there's not like a whole ton of stuff, but you know, Wagner did. You know, Ride of the Valkyrie, or you know, Die Valkyrie has contrabass trombone. You know, you find it probably more often in some opera orchestra sorts of things, but it does happen in more symphonic literature. But you're not wrong. It's not uncommon. And with a modern double valve bass trombone, there's not a note that instrument can play, or you know, that the contrabass trombone's going to have that the double valve bass trombone can't play. So it's, to me, it's mostly a timbre thing, which at that point it's like, you know, do you need it? It's like
expensive timbre decision.
Right. Making. But you know, if you're gonna play bass trombone in, you know, and orchestra, you know, eventually you should probably get a contrabass trombone, but that's like if you're in a top tier orchestra. Craig also says, I know with the Dallas Circle, the opera and symphony share them. Talking about contrabass trombones, or is that bass trumpets? I know with contrabass trombones, like the tuba player in the Dallas Opera has one, and he is usually the person that plays it if they use it. But I would say it's generally less common for the tuba player to do it than it is and that would only be if there's not maybe a tuba part. I don't know the last time that they've used it, so but I know he has played it in there. And now, especially with you know, Brian Hecht, you know, being the 4th trombonist in the Dallas Symphony, I know he has his own tine, so they're covered at least with that. But I could definitely see with the bass trumpet that maybe they're sharing them, because it doesn't come up as much, and most people don't necessarily own them, and you usually only need one, although there are pieces where you do need two. Like Janacek Sinfonietta has 2 bass trumpet parts. Let's see here. So we got a couple across. Wagner tube and all of it, yeah. Makes sense. Keith and Mystery Jeffrey saying hello to each other. Grant, hello Grant. I'm not sure if this is a Grant that I know. I know multiple Grants. Maybe this is a Grant that I know. Maybe it's not. It's kind of hard to tell. Let's see.
They might all be saying hello to each other.
Yeah, maybe.
It's just like running in the jubilee of the hellos.
Yeah, and Craig, yeah, Jeff does have a Chinese one, but yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. They're expensive, but also, you know, one of my arguments, you know, I believe I'll eventually own a contrabass trombone. Will it be a sound investment? Probably not, but I do intend on getting one at some point. Probably not anytime soon. I have other needs to deal with, or needs are strong words. I have other instruments I'd like to purchase before that time. But yeah, you know, those sorts of things, they kind of have to float around to some extent because they're just not very well used. And they're not really a good investment for anybody. But if you want to get good at one of those instruments, it's best to have it, or at least have access to it regularly.
That's valid.
You're not, that's the other thing with people who ask to borrow like my alto trombone sometime. It's like, so you don't own one, you've never really played one, you want me to just give you mine and you'll figure it out. And it's like, are you going to damage my slide because you don't realize how short it is because your muscle memory isn't used to that? And then I'm going to get a damaged slide. And it's like, yeah, I'm not really interested in that. Thank you. But yeah.
That's one of those instruments I would not ask to borrow, just because I wouldn't ask to borrow anyone's alto trombone, because I know myself. I think I've played an alto trombone. I shouldn't say how many times, because it's an embarrassingly small amount of times. I think every time I've gone, and then yanked the slide off all the way.
Yeah, and I was fortunate. It's like with my alto trombone situation, it's like when I was at UNT as an undergrad, they, over the summer, no one was using it, and I asked if I could check it out and pay the $50 or whatever for the summer. So it's like I had access through that before I was able to have one in my possession. And yeah, they're not great investments for the most part for most people. But if you're going to play principal trombone in an orchestra someday, you will use. I will say that compared to contrabass trombone, compared to bass trumpet, it does officially come up more often. But again, just like with the contrabass trombone, technically there's nothing that the tenor trombone can't do. Like before, when I was in high school, I played Beethoven 5, technically an alto trombone part. Played on a small bore. And, it goes up pretty high, but it's technically still playable because there's no highest note on a brass instrument.
You're sitting in the back row and they're not really concentrating that hard on what trombone you're using. They're not going to care.
Right. Especially I was in youth orchestra. It's like they're not going to require me to.
Like, where's your alto trombone?
Right. So yeah. But yeah, those sorts of instruments are not always the best investment. But it gets a little bit different when you talk about like bass trombone from the perspective of a tuba player, from the perspective of a tenor trombonist, or the euphonium from the perspective of a tenor trombonist or a tuba, or tenor trombone from the perspective of a euphonium, like whatever kind of adjacent instrument. Those often will pay for themselves. Or have the potential to, I should say. I can't guarantee that you'll get gigs or anything.
Depends on what your goals are and what your skills are and what you seek to gain from it.
But you came up as a trombone player, but you've made money with the euphonium, and there's probably more money for you to make on the euphonium in the future. Maybe not a lot, but
Right. I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Not to speak for you.
I would say we're not in the red in euphonium world, but it's not a huge.
Right. Yeah, I'm not saying that you're going to, that's going to be how you afford a boat in retirement or something. Like it's not necessarily that much, but especially, if you're a euphonium player and you're thinking about a tenor trombone and it won't kill you financially, I would say get it.
You've got so many transferable skills already just from the beautiful euphonium sound that you can create, and the translation between the old buttons and the slide is so quick.
You can figure it out.
You will get the hang of it quicker than you think. And then, I made friends with most of the great euphonium players that I met at UNT because they were in the reading bands with me in the summer, like playing big band. And they sounded like, I was like, wow, these are really good trombone players. And then it came out after we got lunch or were talking on the bandstands, like, these are euphonium majors, and they were sounding excellent on the trombone, and that was cool to witness. That was my first exposure to low brass players at all. I think at North Texas was hungry euphonium players that I think some of them owned trombones, some of them just got trombones and then just showed up and played big band for fun in the summer, and that was cool.
Right.
Good way to do it.
Right, definitely. Yeah, it's those sorts of things can often be helpful. And even Connor and I were also talking, I think off stream, like a week or two ago, about potentially getting a sousaphone for Connor was thinking about that because there's money to be made doing it. Will it pay for itself? Depends on what price. Depends on how often you're working with it. But ultimately, you know, all of those sorts of things, you know, kind of can work together. And Craig says trombone is all about the ear, but what I would argue is that all instruments are about the ear. The trombone definitely exposes you the most. I would argue, though, that like if you're a good euphonium player, you have a good ear. Not saying any, especially brass, but also all, like, if you're going to be an elite player on any instrument, you have to have a good ear.
Right. Eventually it all evens out. Like, there's like a certain moment of novelty, like whenever like I switch over to playing the valves, particularly when I switch from like improvising on a slide instrument to improvising on a valve trombone. And there's like a little period, it could be like a few weeks of just like, oh, this is so much easier, this is great. And then eventually, like, the harder and more critically and more honestly I listen to like what's actually coming out of the bell, it's like the intonation issues or the clarity issues of my vocabulary that I had on the slide are identical on pistons. Like, you know, I can flutter up some like little things a little bit faster maybe on the valves, but then other than that, it's like hearing the stuff is the exact same.
Keith says that we just bought another harp, so sousaphone is officially next on the list. So I guess Keith is going to steal my one sousaphone gig a year, which is very disappointing. I thought I had a nice thing going, but yeah, that's
good for too long, buddy.
I feel like it, you know, if you bought a harp, like the next two should be you, right? That's how that works.
Right.
When your spouse buys a harp, you should get the value of that harp translated to your instruments.
How many sousaphones is that?
Yeah, how many sousaphones do you get per harp, Keith? I think that's what the people really want to know. And just
that's related to my other question I had in my head, which was how many like $100 to $125 like club gigs would you have to book for your contrabass trombone band to pay off your contrabass trombone?
Let's call it 100 to make the math easier for 10,000.
Sure. Okay, fine. So 100 gigs. All right. If you got a busy year with your contrabass trombone band.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you can sneak it into stuff, you know.
Sherlock's.
I mean, yeah, especially with like a piston bass trumpet, I could definitely get away with playing that on a gig or two.
In a cover band, even. Yeah.
I could, and I could claim that it paid for itself because of that. I don't know that that's really true, but
that would be very confusing for concert goers of a rock band, because most of the time when they see the trombone, you'll get one of two answers. It'll say, "Can I touch your trumpet?" or they will say, "Can I touch your tuba?"
Right.
So if you had a bass trumpet, they might be really confused.
I know people who've done it though. It's definitely not completely unreasonable, and it wouldn't be the worst place to practice it and play the instrument.
I think it'd be awesome. It'd be so much fun.
But ultimately, with a bass trumpet, I don't really want to go the piston route. I'd rather have a kind of more proper symphonic instrument, being what?
Spatula?
A spatula. Being a rotor bass trumpet, probably pitched in the key of C, is kind of where, you know, where I've thought about going. But there are lots of different ways to do the bass trumpet thing, because I think sometimes it should be B flat, and then there are also parts that are written in E flat and should really be more trumpet-like parts. Like Stravinsky Rite of Spring is like a perfect example of that. It's like just in one part of the trumpet player's one of the trumpet parts. And, you know, and then there's also like Wagner wrote for trumpet and bass trumpet in E flat, and like there are like high G flats in Rheingold, I think is the highest note, if I remember correctly.
So is an E flat bass trumpet pitched like an alto trombone?
Yes.
And it's got high G flats in it? Sounds hard.
You know. Yeah, I mean, it's a high note for us, you know, low brass people. But it's, you know, it's not so bad. I think a long time ago, I recorded that section on alto trombone on Instagram. I bet it's still up there. Someone wants to dive through my Instagram and find it. But yeah, the part gets up there. And there's a lot of other high stuff, even if it's not all, you know, that note specifically. There's a lot of high stuff in that. And bass trumpet sometimes can be that way. There's a lot of high bass trumpet excerpts, and it's just a part of it. But there are also some where it's like you need to get to the low notes also, which is why I think a lot of players compromise and end up getting an instrument pitched in C with 4 valves, and then you can do any of the low stuff you need to, but you can also a little bit easier get to the high stuff than maybe a B flat instrument. Especially when you're talking about something like that, a G flat, like that high. The overtone series is very close. Even if you can play it on the other ones, which you probably can, it's not necessarily the perfect thing. And Craig says the E flat bass trumpet is typically played by a trumpet player because it has a tiny mouthpiece. Yeah, that's not untrue. It's also I would just, I mean, it's, you know, you could get anything custom made to stick in there at the end of the day. But
traditionally, though,
realistically, E flat bass trumpet in this country barely exists. From like a practical standpoint, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I have never gone to an orchestra concert where there was an E flat bass trumpet, and I'm definitely looking every single time. It's much more often a bigger instrument. But yeah, it is more there. You see more trumpet players playing it. So, I don't know. I still want to have one at some point, but that's definitely a that's more of a hobby thing than it is a real, like. At the end of the day, most of the bass trumpet things that are put on the like a tenor trombonist or, you know, a euphonium player, like when it becomes their job, it's usually not rite of spring, and even the rite of spring stuff, or, you know. A lot of that stuff, it's like even if it is, it's like the rite of spring. That stuff's not actually that high, not that involved, even though it is E flat bass trumpet. But yeah, usually, you know, in this country, almost always when something like Das Rheingold is performed in an opera orchestra, it's someone playing a C bass trumpet, and it's usually a trombone player. Like in the case of the Met, it's probably Denson Paul Pollard playing a C Yamaha, one of 2 instruments that was ever made for rotor bass trumpet. But, you know, that doesn't mean it couldn't be other things. And I think it would just be fun to experiment with that. And in my like made up fairy tale land, that's what I do, is just toy around with instruments.
Right.
But I realize that that's not necessarily, you know, that doesn't really make sense. I'll put it that way.
Well, in your fiddling with instruments, confusing auxiliary world, I have a question for you.
Okay, I potentially have an answer. You
related to the high G flat.
Sure.
Okay, so I was watching. I can't remember whose band it was.
Actually, if you want to ask a question, you should put it in the chat. I'm just kidding.
I should. All right. Anyways, I was watching one of those Hollywood Squares big band recordings that was like coming out all this past year when everyone was doing like pre-recorded big band stuff, and I saw the clearest high G flat on a trombone, regular trombone, I think I've ever heard.
By regular, do we mean tenor? Let's use our
regular tenor, regular trombone, small bore, normal trombone. I will not change my opinion on that. But yeah, it was F sharp, G flat, second position. It was super clear, and it sounded like it was slotting right where it needed to go. Does that mean that there is like, what, like 13th scale degree? Like that would be like within like the A harmonic series, then F sharp. Does that make sense?
I don't know what can you rephrase your question?
Okay, so the note was an F sharp. It was in second position, which is like in the key of A. It was like the really high one, so it's like a 13. Does that make sense, or was I like not looking at it correctly? Because like normally, like an octave below that, you would play an F sharp in shortchanged third position.
Yeah, you can play a note like that. You're getting to where you can play it almost anywhere you want, and it just comes down to where it slots for you.
Okay.
I personally, with anything above and like the F at the top of the treble clef staff, like the highest note that's generally written for tenor trombone or any trombone, anything above that, I do the positions from the octave below because I can guarantee you I know where that is.
Right. It's kind of like been my default, but like I heard it on the recording, and I was like, wow, that sounds like it's really meant to be there. Like this person knows what they're doing.
And there are tons of people who do different positions. Like I know people who swear by E flat and third up there, but while most people play E flat and, you know, kind of where your
Little
G is.
second.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, the partials are just getting closer and closer together as you get up there, and you have so many options.
Pick your favorite.
Right. You know, that's... I also realized that we did skip a question, I think.
Oops.
I'm sorry, Paul. Are breathing exercises worth practicing, in your opinion? I think that they can be, but that's definitely not a thing that I usually do. With my students, it's rare that I will do it, but I will occasionally do it. But my general philosophy is that it's only if I think that we need to kind of retool some things. It's not my default thing. But that being said, each student is different. You know, you specifically, Paul, could really need that right now. I don't know. And if you were one of my students, maybe I would find that out very quickly that that's exactly what you need right now. Or maybe I wouldn't figure it out, but that is what you need, you know. But essentially, you know, everybody needs something a little bit different. I think in general, my feeling is that it's not what everybody needs, and it gets overdone a little bit. So I tend to globally counteract that, which maybe is wrong. Do you have any thoughts, Connor?
Yeah, pretty similar. I've definitely like done it before. Like I went to a breathing gym in high school, didn't have any adverse effects on me. I didn't notice it getting my playing any better. And what I'll say is like normally music that's written well will either be written in a way that like the musical phrase is something that you can play without thinking about breathing, or you're in concert band.
Yeah, you don't play tuba.
Yeah, I guess I don't. Because I'm talking about trombone world. But usually it's covered and it's not a big issue. I don't like know a lot of like professional musicians that are like, oh, I got a big concert coming up. We're playing the, you know, Vienna Philharmonic Fanfare. I gotta do some expanding my lungs, make sure I'm ready for the show, sort of thing. I guess you do write in like, you know, where you're going to breathe.
I think this is more of like a in for 4, out for 2 sort of question is kind of my interpretation of the question.
Oh, that's good for if you want to like decrease your heart rate, like if you're nervous before an audition, like box breathing. That's great, but it doesn't help me with like my like ability to play the trombone.
Right. Yeah, I'm definitely not saying that it's, you know, you can't ever do it, but it's definitely not my default.
Right. Try it out. Like if there's something that works for you, then like that's a good sign.
Right.
You should do that.
But yeah. So, and Craig also said when the Dallas Symphony did Valkyrie, they got Denson Paul Pollard to play bass trumpet. And it's like, yep, why not just hire basically one of the best people to do it? You know, it's that simple. And I'm sure he did an amazing job because he's played that so many times, I'm sure, in the Met. Let's see. Anime crossover, I don't know how to answer that. I don't have a witty comment for that. Mystery Jeffrey says that he breathes while he's asleep. Yeah. And that's the thing, too. It's like there's a lot of... I think that there's going to be a lot of harm that's done with teaching breathing. You know... that it just, you know, because especially, you know, Logan's talking about, you know, breathing is the thing that they need to work on the most, you know, lung capacity. And it's like, yeah, your lung capacity is not really going to get bigger. You can get more efficient per se, which is
right.
Is definitely a good thing. But yeah, they're just at the end of the day, I think a lot of emphasis is placed on breathing that maybe in some ways is misconstrued and not as helpful. And especially with the tuba, there's a lot of emphasis, especially in a lot of band programs that I've worked with, on tubas need to get through this whole phrase without breathing. And it's just like, cool, so they're going to sound bad.
Right.
And one of the things, you know, when I was studying with Matt Good of the Dallas Symphony, he would get on me, and especially, it's like I'm significantly a larger human and I'm younger, which means that my lung capacity probably hasn't gone down in the way that his might have, just from being, slightly older. I've always had a big lung capacity, and he's been very successful with not the world's largest lung capacity. And so I would play these really long phrases and I would be able to get through it, and he was just like, why are you doing that? You need to take a breath. And, he would always tell me, don't compromise your sound or the musical phrase or whatever to play it on one breath. It's like, just take a breath. In the grand scheme of things, in a full ensemble, most of the time people aren't going to notice. But that's definitely not what's taught in a lot of band programs. Yeah, Mystery Jeffrey says, where is more important than how is how I think. I think that there's definitely something to that. I would say that there's also something to how you do that, like how it tapers or doesn't taper and things, not necessarily the physical act but how you finesse that breath. Because I think especially with the tuba, with trombone this comes up occasionally, but for the most part, you don't have to make the same, and euphonium as well, you don't have to make the same sacrifices as a tuba player or a bass trombone player often does, where you kind of just have to figure a way to make it sound musical with, with having a space in there, or how you're going to do it. Like, I've heard really crazy things, like an example that probably is familiar to a lot of tuba players is Gene Percorni on his Excerpts album talking about playing the low G flat in Ein Heldenleben. There's like one where it's a low, it starts out loud and then it's soft from that point, G flat, and he plays it really loud because it's coming from something else, and then he takes a breath, and in a big hall that's going to sustain, and then he comes in on a pianissimo G flat after that breath, and no one ever knows. Is that wrong? Yes. But is it wrong in a way that matters, and it probably actually gives a better product to someone in the audience? So therefore it's right. But yeah, I think that, breathing is complicated, and definitely giving advice about breathing over the internet is maybe not the best thing to do always. Again, some people may really need to be doing breathing exercises. But I tend to think about breathing just kind of like a backswing in golf or in tennis. It needs to kind of match what you're doing. And that kind of is as deep as I often go into it for most students. So, but maybe that's a good place to kind of end things. Do you have any closing remarks, any groundbreaking ideas, Connor?
No, I have no cool hot takes on breathing.
Yeah, I think we've already given our somewhat as hot takes as we... This isn't a hot take sort of place. This isn't a condemning...
Not a hot take channel.
No, obviously there has to be some level of that, and maybe that's what's really holding this channel back, is we're not answering the tough questions. We're not saying things that are controversial, because in my experience, especially with YouTube and Instagram, do things that are controversial and you'll get more views.
It's true.
But yeah, we try to not do that exactly. But thank you all for coming to the stream. And I think next week not sure what's happening next week or the week after, to be frankly honest about it. We'll see. I think the week after will probably be okay. But
Things will have cooled off by then.
right. But I know that I have a gig that Wednesday, so it would have to be on another day. And I might just do a guest host next week is what I'm thinking. I've already reached out to a few people that are maybe able to do it, but we'll see. We'll see exactly the plan. But thank you all for watching this stream, and I hope you have a good rest of your Wednesday night, and we'll see you, or at least I'll see you next week probably.